a podcast where we simply explore all the things that I'm thinking about. Thank you for sharing your attention with me. Truly, truly. Even if you only share your attention with me for a brief few seconds, often many people do. Yesterday, I was doing a podcast from on top of a mountaintop, which of course was a very unique vantage point, and it was in a sense, a memorial for my beloved Xiao. And I noticed 26 people who essentially came up and visited my podcast for maybe 5, 10 seconds, some of them for 9 seconds, some of them just on and off. And I recognize the algorithms and the whole way that YouTube essentially promotes videos and pushes for things forward can be manipulated severely with different patterns. And perhaps as we move out of AI influence, there will be people that will essentially be trying to, thwart any type of videos or podcasts or creations that they somehow don't approve of. And why I'm speaking about this is today's podcast is on pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is being able to see beyond the obvious and to see the conditions or perhaps the patterns which are present, yet often concealed. Oftentimes, they're concealed simply because most people are too busy or too engulfed within their own personal world of drama that they're unable to see the patterns which lie behind so much of what's within our world. Now, me, myself, and I've had a really easy ability to see so many different patterns. And honestly, not just to see the patterns that exist around me, but also to formulate those patterns, those algorithms, those systems of the same repetitive outcomes and such. And this is most often highlighted in a game that I play called Pokemon. Now, Pokemon is a card game, and my son and I, we actually joined an amazing group of Pokemon card players about 2 years ago, and we had some amazing fun. Now, prior to that, had the ability to randomly just see one card, and within seeing that one card, I would have these ideas and these patterns, which were building the decks of 60 cards to create a certain outcome of or desired effect on the card. Now, with this, if you've ever played it, you essentially have the ability to choose your own 60 cards. There are rules to which cards can and cannot be used and how many of each card can be used. But you essentially create a deck of 60 cards and you battle your opponent. And what should be an amazing, unique, and creative experience turns into an algorithmic, repetitious. You can see why they make certain cards the way they do for money reasons. And in a sense, once you're able to see that pattern, it takes away from a lot of the beauty that there is. Now, when I first started playing this game, Pokemon, as I mentioned, I played it with other people. I played it with my son. And so when you only have the ability to play a certain amount of games per hour, it's a lot more challenging to see these patterns. Yet, after my son and I stopped going to those in person events, we started playing online and we started playing with a online digital version of that platform. And this allowed me to essentially go through a lot more games per hour, meaning not that I played them, well, sometimes I did, but that the game could be easier to start up and then easier to finish. And shortly after, I started seeing these repetitious algorithms and AI players come into my stream, and these people would play, and I mean the AI. You could easily tell that they were AI. They would be constantly like card, 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 card. Like there wouldn't even be time for thinking. It would just be constantly being cards put down. And anyways, with this increased rate of playing this game, I was able to see very easily the patterns and the algorithms. some of these decks are composed of very limited number of cards, not in the limitation of the actual number of cards. They all have 60, but many of these decks actually relied on almost what they call, well, they call it OP, which means overpowered. But for me, overpowered means cheating. They recently created this card, a Lucario card. Lucario is a very famous Pokemon when it comes to the TV series, both within the new version that's on Netflix as well as the old version with Ash Ketchum. And they created this card that was severely overpowered. They created so many different cards to accommodate only this energy type. So this energy type is a fighting stone type. And then they made this card so overpowered and so easily to use. Then they gave it to everyone in the on the online part because of course, you know, that's free marketing for them. And then they released this card specifically in a what they call a booster box. So you basically pay an overpriced amount for some booster packages, and they give you a free copy of this particular card. And these cards, this Lucario card, is supposed to be like a very rare card to get, and it is. You'd have to open up dozens of packages of booster cards in order to get this one card. So it seems like a deal from, you know, the parent's perspective who may not realize or understand that this card is actually, you're paying for that card. You're buying that card and you're buying it at a lot more than it's really valued. Although it looks flashy and beautiful, you know, it's still, it costs them pennies to print. And yet there's a huge economy that's created off of this. And I was able to see the patterns. They did the same thing with another deck from Pokemon cards, this one called Charizard. It was a terrestrialized version of the Charizard card, and it was the same thing. They brought out an overpowered card, an overpowered different cards to go along with that deck specifically, and many people ran out and bought that card because they wanted to have the OP deck. Keeping in mind, OP for me means overpowered, meaning it's cheap. And so my experience was actually to be able to see that, to witness that. Now, it just didn't stop there. I started noticing other things when I started playing online. For instance, this morning I had a game, and this has happened so many times, where I have a 25 or 40% chance of getting a card, but yet I can go through several hands. Like I was on my 12th turn before I even got an energy card or got a supporter card. And you'll understand that more if you were to play the Pokemon. But yet I can see and run at the odds in my head of the possibility of different things. And when, you know, you're sitting there for 4 turns and you're not getting any cards, you're drawing dead as they would call it, and then the opponent is constantly just pulling off every single card that they get, there's a pattern there that's going on. Now, of course, there is the possibility that pattern is created by me, meaning that because I've come to expect it, perhaps I'm creating it, or at least co-creating it, or at least giving them the inside scoop to get in and, you know, help me create that reality. And yet there are so many other patterns out there. For instance, there's this pattern of new signs all over the place. And, you know, well, some people would say, oh, you know, they're just trying to be safer. The pattern I see is that there's an abundance of signs and someone has the contract to put up new signs. And so therefore they're trying to get whatever contracts that can be given out at the smallest amount right now. And, you know, I see that as putting stop sign or not stop signs, putting no parking signs and, you know, signs that show people that there's something there. Like someone's going around and they're now putting all of these reflective signs on all of the poles, telephone poles that are in the middle of the sidewalk or they're close to the road. And you can definitely see that there's, well, there's no need for a lot of it. And yet when I look at that, that's what I see. I see that pattern. And there's other patterns as well that we see on, well, in on my news feed and my recommended feed. We see certain informations that are coming up in order to essentially influence us into creating things. I was recently told that it was supposed to be brimstone and fire at this particular end that we were meant to go upon, and yet that's not happening. And yet I can see all those mild influences of the fear porn that's all over social YouTube and other places. And even in one of my channeled videos, I heard someone tell me literally that I was to expect something big to happen, like a volcano occurring. And, cancel, because right away I see that as an influence, a pattern that's trying to perhaps help convince people who do listen to expect or perhaps project the possibility of that, believing that, there could be a positive thing that would be connected with it. And yet, in my opinion, the positiveness would actually be for God to come back and, you know, be one with us and release those illusions that so many people are behind, you know. Yeah, I think I had a lot more ideas when it came to patterns because those aren't just the patterns that I see. The other patterns I see is the things that people say in my reality, as if they're trying to elicit some sort of fear or projection upon me. Like, I actually had my building manager ask me, or he actually informed me that the post office was complaining about my mailbox being full. Well, first of all, my mailbox isn't full. There's stuff in there that I could care less whether or not I ever look at again because I recognize those patterns that I was talking about. And yet I could see the oddity and the pattern again. And this isn't just a pattern with that one person, it's a pattern with people around me trying to coax me into, perhaps what they think that the outcome will be, and into an action, I mean, that they believe an outcome would be beneficial perhaps for them. And so I see things, little things like that. And I'm not saying that any one person specifically involved. See, I've often talked about the narcissistic energies or the entities that perhaps surround us within that lower astral type of devils may cry reality, where those are perhaps working through the people within my field, within my reality, in order to try to put me in a heightened state of fear or worry and concern. And yet, when we're able to sit back, relax, chill out, we're able to see a lot more, perceive a lot more. See, it's not only God that is helping us truly have that, we'll call it the third eye, that visionary vision, that, connection with our wisdom. It's also being able to receive multiple stimuli from all different directions and then having the ability to process all of that data in a short span of time. And I've spoken before about sometimes when I used to talk or during the beginning portions of my waking up, I could actually listen to myself and talk. And while I was listening to myself, I would also be analyzing the things that I said, recognizing that sometimes those things that came out of my mouth weren't actually me saying it. And that's an example of another pattern, and a pattern of, you can call it control, and being able to see that, to perceive the essentially the pattern of these energies coming in and distorting what I'm saying by adding in their little bits of this or that, or perhaps altering or affecting even body language. Sometimes when you're in that heat of that moment, even the body language, the energy of how your body can shift can alter the conversation. And so being more open and relaxed and allowing your body to be calm means that nothing's going to affect your body language, which is very important when we're actively listening. And what I mean by active listening, I mean actually hearing what the other person is saying and receiving what they're saying without thinking about what we're going to say next. And so that's another example of, something affecting us. Sometimes we'll get all these ideas we want to defend, and we have all these ideas come to our head, and as the Untethered Soul book had described, that voice in our head that's always, constantly thinking and being repetitive and questioning and mocking in a lot of senses. So once again, being able to see those patterns helps us open our eyes to perhaps a world of control. And so that's why I put up on the end of this title of who's going first. And I've come to understand through my own experiences and my own pattern recognition and, observations with the general world around me that there is a lot of deception, a lot of deception. And I underline a lot of deception. See, I believed once upon a time that deception was perhaps limited to, the political arena or the media arena or, you know, movies. I never realized how far the deception went until I started to realize how prevalent an organization called the Freemasons were. And the Freemasons, if you don't know who they are, which is amazing if you don't, but if you don't know who the Freemasons are, they were a so-called secret society, or you can call them a unsecret society now anyways. They were an organization of a city or a town's, we'll call them ruling population. It's the people that were part of specific, perhaps families, had the abilities to maybe manifest to a higher degree. They were in prominent people within the communities, the mayors, the police commissioners, and a lot of other people that essentially ran the town. And they all had these houses that were located in different towns. Now, I've been to the outside of several of them, in Summerland, in British Columbia, in Hope, although the one in Hope has been closed down since I discovered it, in Nanaimo, actually all over the place. There were a lot of these meeting places where people would get together and essentially decide the structure and the organization and the way that the town was or the city was moving forward. And actually, funny enough, after my grandmother had passed, I had heard about it before, but I had never known fully of it. But I discovered that my grandfather, he himself was a Freemason as well. And I all saw his little card where he paid his dues. And I learned that my great grandmother was also part of the Freemasons. Now, she wasn't part of the Freemasons as in the men, because there was a division between men and women, supposedly. She was part of the Order of the Eastern Star. And they had this really cool ring. And on the ring, I learned later, they would basically, in the beginning of their group meetings, we'll call it, after the dues have been paid and all that lovely stuff. I never actually attended one. This is just things I've been learning because I've been learning and talking to people about it. I discovered that one of the beings that the Order of the Eastern Star, I will say covenants or, worships maybe even, was Esther. And Esther, funny enough, was the goddess of fertility. And that was very interesting to make that discovery because I've, for a long while now, once again, seeing patterns in how everything's created, understood that, for instance, Easter, we have all of these unanswered questions of why Easter is Easter, and yet Easter and Esther, the worshiping of Esther, actually came during the spring, such as the Easter time came as well. And Esther, being the goddess of fertility, she was represented by white bunnies. And if you make that connection, how they have put white eggs and white bunnies and lovely stuff, fertility and bunnies have always been associated with fertility since when bunnies are born, there's lots of them and they can like spawn out of control in a sense. And so I came to understand that the worshiping of Esther also was in alignment with, amazingly enough, the worship of Easter. Easter now has its own marketing campaign put all around it to essentially intoxicate or essentially add all of this high fructose corn syrup in all of the fake milk chocolate that's sold in abundance from the dollar stores. And once again, we get back into seeing patterns. We get back into understanding why certain things happened at certain times. For instance, I came to understand that even Christmas Day, December 21st, used to be a pagan holiday or a pagan day of worship when they worshiped what I'll call Tree Day. And so therefore, when we look at Christmas and we ask, well, why is there a tree in the center of everyone's room? Well, we come to understand that, you know, the pagans, or not pagans necessarily, but the cultures perhaps of the Caucasian people, you know, they worship perhaps a tree. And therefore, to align that with a day that, you know, you are essentially worshiping another being, and then, you know, that's essentially a pattern that's created in order to indoctrinate or to bring in your own version of things. And after a while, you know, you highlight the chocolate eggs and the gift giving, and you highlight the marketing portion of it, and you run it several times, and then you get 8 people around you to go off and talk about it. Then it reinforces the idea or the illusion of that. And then soon enough, everyone's projecting their own illusion of what that means. And so with pattern recognition, I've been able to see people in my own world that participate and reinforce these differing ideas, these illusions of self-doubt and, you know, essentially bringing on distortions within people. There was this one woman that every time that I saw her come into my store, she would always bring negativity with her. And it would always be self-doubt that even when she said something nice, I could feel that it wasn't nice behind it, as if there was an attempt to reinforce ideas. And as I said with the building manager suggesting that I look in my mailbox, and he even brought up and asked me, "Oh, are there bills there that you don't wanna see?" Like, he even tried to project that idea, and like I said, I'm not saying it was him, but I could see the pattern of that particular situation. Or here's another pattern, a pattern where 1 month something happens, like 2 or 3 months of not paying a bill, for example, and then a bill comes up with a final notice. And yet that bill gets rectified, and then a couple months later, they don't even wait a full month before they're sending that again. And once again, I'm not necessarily saying it's any one person in particular. It's all of those forces. And perhaps we go all the way back to these Freemasons. Now, the Freemasons, as I've seen it, their houses, at least from my own observation, like the one in Nanaimo, the one in Hope, the one in Hope's actually was up for sale the last time I was there. The one in Nanaimo was closed down. The one in, anyways, I went to several. And when I drove across Canada, I drove from Nanaimo all the way over to Montreal. I passed by many of them, and the funny thing is they were all closed. So perhaps that order is no longer active as much as they were. And yet you can see the patterns, and knowing that, oh, there was another lodge in Moose Jaw, and knowing these patterns exist beyond the visual perception or the know of perhaps most of the people, but definitely at least to some of the people. See, systems of control are organized by patterns, expectations of things that happen. They have an expectation of what could be, so a pattern is built around that to reinforce that and then to essentially control the outcome. And the more and more that we're able to see those patterns, the more and more we're able to free ourselves from the system of control. Because the system of control was very, very deep. The system of control that they had, the patterns that they employed in order to even hold on to their power were vast as well. As I understand it, there were kill chips and there was, extortion with the e-files, and there was corruption within, even the Playboy Mansion. There were different situations that you essentially reinforce shame and guilt, and the lesser of two evils was another program of control. And yet all of that becomes obvious to be seen as a pattern when a person has that moment to sit back, relax, and do no thing. See, do no thing simply means to be still and present in the moment in order to actually receive the messages and communications that are flowing into you always. I've come to see intuition, for example, as not this mythological, we'll call it accident that happens. It's more of a direct connection, a direct phone line, a wireless phone line that has been distorted and disrupted for such a long time. And then we've had a lot of different patterns and programmings that have been overlaid upon us to get us to believe it was something other than what it was. I even heard that, or it was related to perhaps, that our stomach was a brain and it had neurons, and that our heart had neurons and our brain had neurons. Now, see, that was part of my discovery that things were considerably different, and that the feelings and the intuitive hits that my gut gets, that gut feeling or that heart-filled feeling, that it was somehow physical. And yet shortly over the course of a lot of, we'll call it studying, I realized that it's God speaking to us. And not just God as in God, but I mean the source of all things. And that can be the higher self. That can be the monad or whatever it is. That can even be what you consider love to be, speaking to and through us. And so coming back to the pattern part again, seeing and spending time in that meditation, even if that meditation's only 3 minutes, which is what my do no thing videos are. They are 3-minute short meditations that not only can you use them in a moment of anger and or frustration, or someone's honking the horn at you, pop up on that nice big display that I can envision being in an Aria, a Nissan Aria, forest, not forest, it's actually, the color is called Northern Lights Metallic. I can envision my video popping up on the console, and you're sitting in traffic and you just take that 3 minutes to connect, to calm yourself down, and then there might be an amazing amount of wisdom that comes with it. And see, with patterns, it doesn't have to be that we have to succumb to or avoid those patterns. See, another pattern, I don't know if you can hear this right now, another pattern that I see quite often and that I experienced even this morning was disruptions within my own area. See, I wanted to do a video and I was originally thinking one place and there was a distraction there. And then I walked away to go to somewhere else. And then suddenly another distraction came up, and then walked a little bit more and someone started cutting the grass. And then I walked some more to this location right now. And right across the street, someone started blowing leaves, and they're not actually blowing leaves. You know what they were doing? They were using the leaf blower to blow the cherry blossoms that had fallen from a tree. They were actually blowing the cherry blossoms off of the pavement, which I just find amazingly funny. And so, see, even those patterns, and now in the background, the construction noise has suddenly got a lot louder as I'm continuing to talk, because I purposely position myself to be in between several different buildings. And funny enough, I heard it when I started recording, but it was very low, and now it's very high. And so all of this might seem like we'll call it a conspiracy theory, keeping in mind that the conspiracy theory word was created by the CIA as a way to essentially get people to doubt themselves and to kind of, create a word that would perhaps, convince or influence people not to follow certain trains of thought. And it was an easy and accessible label that people could use to perhaps even stop a person from talking. You're sitting there explaining what you've seen, for example, the patterns you've seen. You're getting in your gut feeling that that's not an accident, because there are no coincidences. In my opinion, my faith, my belief, everything's a synchronicity. There's a reason for most things that come into your life. When a painter paints a painting, everything within the frame of that painting, there is a purpose, a reason for it being there, even if it's only to add in background. There's a purpose. And so with those, we'll call them synchronicities, or those observations that we have, there's a reason. And so, to distort it, as I understand it, this term was created. Well, first of all, conspiracy simply means that one or more people are involved and they're working together in the shadows. And then theory simply means a theory. It's a working hypothesis. That's what theory means. And if you don't know what a hypothesis is, it's what scientists often use when they're trying to essentially create new theories. See, science was originally created in order to help explain and understand the world. So what scientists did is, when they had a theory, they would create a hypothesis, and then they would essentially test that hypothesis in order to, we'll call it, prove a theory, but still a theory is a theory until it's been proven. And that's essentially what I ask in this video, is who's going to be first? Who's going to come out of the shadows first, whether it's in my life, this reality that I live in, or if it's a little bit further. There's actually a lot of different people in media coming forward and saying different things. And, a lot of those so-called conspiracy theories that we have, and I say we as the Homo sapiens, the awakened Homo sapiens, definitely, that we have been observing. It's those patterns that we have intuitively known or observed to be concrete. And yet when we spoke about them to others, they would be called, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, I like the actual terminology, conspiracy analyst, because if there's one thing that I have learned over these last 3-4 years, is there are many, and I underline the word many, conspiracies ongoing and have been going on for a very long time. And what's the difference between conspiracy theory and the truth? Well, give it a few days and it ends up being just that. Now, it's not that all conspiracy theories are in fact true, simply because there's a lot of distortion and there's a lot of essentially lies that are added into the truth. One of the easiest ways to essentially insert propaganda into any civilized society, and there's actually this video, which I'm going to link up here right now, to do with propaganda. It's an amazing black and white video that I was introduced to by Kim, essentially. And it shows a student learning from a teacher of how to utilize and discern, and essentially training them how to detect propaganda, but more importantly, also how to utilize it themselves. And so we live in a world where propaganda is ongoing. There's an onslaught of propaganda all over the place. There's all these taglines as if a city needs a catchphrase. Yet when you recognize, for example, the pattern of all cities are in fact incorporated entities, means they're corporations, and you see that pattern, then you can understand, well, corporations use taglines and slogans. And even, you get a situation like we did in 2021, and you had all these different slogans like we're all in it together. And essentially it's creating a theme song of sorts and you know, well, it's propaganda, and that's essentially what it is. But propaganda just doesn't end when it comes to things such as that. Propaganda is also in marketing and advertising, the constant onslaught of you should buy a new phone and keeping up with the Joneses and essentially bringing out new phones every year when, in fact, you don't really need a new phone every year. You don't even need a new phone every second year. And yet these advertisements, they essentially pay influencers. They actually paid influencers during the 2021 situation millions and millions of dollars to, reinforce what they wanted you to do. And once again, that's a pattern. Just like the pattern that I see on Rumble, for example, my understanding of Rumble is that it is owned by the Trump Corporation or somehow connected to that. And there's a lot of videos that are supportive, but at the same time, there's a lot of videos that are unsupportive. And when you start to see patterns, you start to recognize that perhaps the whole point is to keep us in a state of chaos, funding enough of one side and funding enough of the other side so that all the people who are bystanders standing around watching what's happening, they're all being encouraged to choose one side or the other. See another pattern, for example, when we look into how our politics has played out. There's always one side that seems dominant, and there's one side that seems the underdog, especially in the American politics, where you have red versus blue, which, by the way, were the colors of the original Halo game, where you had one team red and one team blue, by the way. And that's also, there's another game called Red or Blue, and there's a lot of distinguishing between red and blue. And even in Canadian politics, they took those same colors. They put the red for the Liberals, the blue for the Conservatives, which were essentially the Democrats, and the reds being, well, anyways, I don't care about politics. But the point is that they often will use that same tool of propaganda in order to get us on either sides of any type of argument. And once again, we stop, we breathe, we take in more sources than just one. We utilize and strengthen our discernment. We forge our resilience to jumping into an argument rather than listening. And we are able to see a lot more of those patterns and recognize them for ourselves. So if you're beginning to see patterns in the world around you, my best suggestion for you would be to go and meditate, not on those specific patterns exclusively, yet just to calm the mind. And then after the meditation's over, to then come back to it and see and perhaps gleam further into that pattern. And yeah, be aware that patterns are positive and they can have cons as well. So, meaning that there are positive patterns and there are good patterns, like waking up in the morning and thanking God for the beautiful day, regardless of the weather outside, regardless of what's expected to happen during the day, is an awesome pattern. And that pattern will definitely have its own rewards, as I'm personally experiencing now to several different degrees. So I'm going to leave it right there. And I will admit right away that I haven't been able to look at the screen. The actual camera was facing upwards as it has, and I wanted to see the beautiful sky in this particular frame, and, for you to enjoy the freedom that is right there, right upon us. It's here. I can taste it. And yeah, we're all about to burst into a brand new way of existing. I truly do have faith, and I await the person or the group of people that are going to be the first to step forward and to acknowledge their role in the system of those patterns of creation, whether they were operatives, whether they were bank tellers, whether they were building managers or property managers, whether they were neighbors, friends, or family, wherever they came from, to get to a place where we can release the past and move forward with love and within the state of harmony. Harmony is what is coming back. Love is what is coming back. It's already here. It's all around us. I can feel it. Even with the loss of my cat, I could feel my love for my cat as I was losing her. And that emotional strength that I have essentially been fortified all of my life since I was 12 years old. I was writing very romantic poems about love, and I was feeling love, and love was around every corner. To me, a cherry blossom is a beautiful image of love. And so that's all coming back. So who is going to be the first, not just in my life, but in the world around us? Perhaps you're listening to this and you're in another country. Are you going to be the first to admit to those around you who you are, what you have done, what you have participated in? Are you going to release the past so that together we can essentially remember ourselves, our true selves? Are fully unified and aligned with source, God, self. Are you going to do that so that all of us, so that the world can start creating new patterns and new systems if we need to, yet just revealing what's always been here and has been concealed by all of these patterns? Because the controller of those patterns, most of them, it's gone. The AIs that controlled a lot of those patterns, they're gone. The kill chips, maybe they're gone. The organized societies and those who controlled them, they're gone. The last remnants of those control systems, they're leaving. And what's going to be left is us, you and I, the ones who are listening to this, regardless of what side you found yourself on. So are you going to be the first? You right now who's listening to this? Or perhaps someone will come and essentially disclose something to you that may alter your perception of the world. Perhaps your understanding of how deep these systems and these patterns went within our world, perhaps your understanding isn't as deep as, well, you can say that mine perhaps may be. And yet, maybe now, as you've heard what I've had to say, perhaps you will start to see your own patterns and you will allow that gut feeling that you have. You will let go of essentially the programming that we received from elementary school when the teachers made you ask to go to the washroom and they made you avoid.
Yeah. Yeah.